Welcome to the MadTrio podcast. This week we have the California Pariah, Jonathan Charney, James, the Fat Man Stevens, and the old guy makes an appearance.
The old guy is back. Hi, everybody. It's Rob Charney, the old guy.
I don't think we've had you since RFR.
It's been a while. Thank you. I've been absent from radio for a bit.
We got him out of the home.
I haven't been
settled.
I have not been on the MadTrio because I don't consider myself mad.
Well, that's a personal opinion.
All right.
Yeah,
well,
it's all relative.
And besides that, that's the only opinion that counts is mine.
Well, what I tell people is that you're normal to yourself. Everybody else is strange.
That's true. You're absolutely right. I am normal.
I've had this
to
argument with a lot of my nieces.
I am totally normal. It's you I'm worried about.
So
you should be worried when it comes to James. Let's
John,
be honest.
I know you don't watch The Office.
The Office. I don't watch The Office either.
You probably haven't either, but you've probably seen the little skit where it's the American Office, not the. I think the other one was in England.
Yeah.
Yeah, they European.
Right.
But there's a skit in there where he's following I think it was Alexa he's making the joke of, and he drives into a lake.
Okay.
So, actually, Google Maps has sent about 100 drivers into a muddy mess in Colorado because their map was incorrect.
I believe it.
That. That's true.
I had a GPS tell me once to turn left off a bridge.
Oh, I in the early days of GPS, that was very common. I mean, I had a number of Garmin units that right in the middle of a bridge it'd say turn left. Oh, okay.
I've had to do that too, like when I update it, because I don't like having location on my phone.
Yeah.
So usually when I'm finally like, okay, I'll need some directions, it'll tell me to get on the freeway and then get back on the freeway, and I'm like, no, I'm not going to turn off the freeway to get back onto the freeway.
If you really think about it, being really honest, you really think about how good it really is.
Oh, it's amazing.
Consider it's all over the world. I mean, we're just not talking about our little part of the country, whatever it may be. But for the most part, it's pretty damn good.
Well, that wasn't
impressive.
That wasn't the direction I thought you were going, because I think I thought you were going to go back in the old days when the person next to you was reading the map and they weren't doing it correctly in 100 miles an hour. You'd rip the thing from them. And
I will tell you something about that. Okay, I taught a person how to read a map by going and driving in San Francisco and telling them, I want to get to this particular place, and you have to figure out how to get me from point A to point B by reading a paper map. And what I found about this is that when they can understand grid patterns and how maps really work, all of a sudden the light clicks.
Oh, and it's easy.
And you look at a map and you go, oh, I understand. And it's like, okay, now tell me, I want to go north. Which way do I have to turn? Then they learn compass points. And so we've lost that whole ability as far as generation goes. People can't do compass points. They couldn't do paper maps.
I will say, though, that the grid system only works in cities, because if you try to do it around here when it's a bunch of paved over horse trails, it's a little harder.
Well, so
minus compass points.
To a degree.
Yeah,
but compass points are still,
So I was at the McDonald's up in Placerville.
Yeah.
I had James running around the little play place, and there was some grandparents with their grandkid. Surprisingly small county, but James knew the grandkid. But I saw the grandparents actually pull out a full-on paper map.
Good for them.
And we're sitting there, and we're going over their next route that they were going to take. And I was actually really impressed by that, because you don't see that. Now, granted, they are of an older generation. I would expect them to know how to read a map, but that's John.
Oh, is that John? Is that your ring? I thought it was my ring. Oh, sorry.
So,
we both have ring devices here.
But anyways,
sorry
I thought it was really cool to see
the funniest
actually doing that.
You know what? I love atlases.
1, 2.
Oh, atlases are fun.
Okay, so I am the old guy for a reason, all right? I'm a number of generations beyond. But when our kids were young, my wife, for the most, way back machine, my wife and I sat with an atlas of the United States, and we would sit here, okay, these are the routes we're going to. This is the point we want to see.
Me about your guys' trip across.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? It's the greatest way to plan a trip. And I still think, to a degree, when we did in 2016 our motorcycle trip up to Sturgis and all that, we still took an atlas and looked at it and went, okay, well, this is the general routes we want to go. Because when you do it on the computer, it just doesn't feel the same.
Now, I will point this out. So I've used the Google Maps. I've looked at them a few times.
Big Google.
And the thing that drives me nuts.
Thanks, Mr. Bush.
Is that as you zoom out, you lose the side streets. Yep. You lose some of those, and then all of a sudden you're eventually just staring at a few highway routes. You don't get that with a map.
Right.
And that's what I miss about having a map. Now, the most frustrating time I've ever seen somebody use a map is on the streets of San Francisco. Drive down there with a couple of my friends. Literally, in the middle of the road, this guy slammed on his brakes, turned on his dome light, and pulled a map out without turning on e-brakes or anything. Or emergency lights, sorry, not e-brakes, but emergency lights, flashers, and just pulled out a map and
pull out a map,
started reading the map, and I literally like laid on the horn and just went around him, but I'm like, are you kidding me?
Well, he probably was a tourist and may have not even been from this country.
He was not from this country, but I won't go into what country he was from. But
because he was screaming at James in another language. You son of a bitch!
In some countries, that's normal.
Acceptable, yeah.
It is.
So I had a question for you, Dad.
Oh, here we go.
So I'm always curious. I always find
you are his son.
Yes, I am the old guy's son. Believe it or not.
Right.
You know what? He's getting pretty old. Next, he'll be the next generation old guy.
Gray.
That's right. He's getting gray hair.
Yeah, but I still have a full head of hair, though.
But he won't have my golden tones.
So I always find all these obscure bands, obscure from my generation. So did you ever listen to Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show?
Of course.
So there's I found a clip of them, and they're playing. I mean, it was a pretty amazing set, but these guys are high. Let me repeat that. They were
Hook,
high.
Where do you think the name came from?
A roach clip?
Yeah, well, pretty much.
But it's hilarious because this is proof. If you go, there's a Facebook page called Interesting SHT, and the logo's a little poo emoji, and it's down there somewhere. And this guy, it's proof that you can do anything stoned, because the fact this guy can actually play, nevertheless sing, is hilarious. And
have you ever heard of the Grateful Dead, John?
Yeah. Well, don't forget in the '60s, stoner bands.
Hendrick?
Yeah.
Jerry Hendricks, no.
Well, Janis Joplin and
Jerry Garcia, Jimi Hendrix. It's all of them mixed up into one.
Yeah, one long. Okay. Yeah, but that's back my generation.
That's like your opinion, man.
So yes, there were stoner bands, and there were people that obviously were quite intoxicated, and it was
Johnny
unbelievable
Cash?
their ability to.
Well, he was an uppers guy, I thought.
Yeah,
but he's still at that time. Any type of drug was stoned.
True, but I mean this is amazing because they're giggling stoned.
You know, some of the country singers though. We went to see Merle Haggard. All right,
you gotta go see Waylon Jennings.
But that's part of the cover charge.
Merle Haggard was so hammered. He couldn't even figure out which end of the guitar to hold. Had it not been from the backup band, it would have been a complete disaster. I mean,
Willie Nelson back in the day.
So, well, have heard that lots of times Willie isn't completely playing in all the sets.
Not surprising.
Because the fact his guitar has a huge.
Old now.
The fact that
I just heard that he got a show up in Reno.
That's his retirement.
Yeah.
Hey, Willie's been everywhere. Willie will do fine. He's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think most singers, 50s, 60s, 70s, were all on some type of drug at one point. Well, if not alcohol, which I do consider alcohol a drug.
You know who wasn't? Ted Nugent.
Oh, that does not surprise me at all.
Ted Nugent has been clean and sober his whole life.
You want to know who also hasn't, didn't do any of that stuff on the road? Kiss. Gene Simmons. He said his thing was women. In theory, I've heard the same thing about Paul Stanley, but I don't think that's much is true.
I believe that. I'm going to be honest with you.
Do you think Dolly was on drugs at any point?
I could see her doing some stuff.
I could see her doing it, but I could also see her not doing it.
Gene
Dolly
Simmons.
Parton?
Yeah, I could see her like alcohol or something. I mean, not like a.
That's a very good question.
Maybe?
I don't know.
I could see her drinking, but I don't know. I don't see her being like a party girl, but I can see her doing something. Britney Spears, on the other hand, I bet she did everything under the sun.
I'm pretty sure at one point.
It's a shame for Britney.
Yeah, that's kind of a question. I really wonder if Dolly Parton.
That's a very good question. But because she's got such a clean image. I bet.
Littlest whorehouse in.
Well,
Texas.
but that. I mean, so that's because the words rhymed.
That's true. That is true.
Sorry. I think that's what it was. You know, you write a song, you got to get the words, the rhyme right. So I made Whorehouse, a little house. Hey, works. Whatever. You know, I don't know. But that's a good question. I don't know if some of the female stars back then were, well, other than Janice for sure.
Whitney Houston.
Well, yes, we do know that Whitney definitely had a problem.
White streak?
I guess. It was a shame. I mean, that's a sad one. That's a sad one. Because I think at one time she was the best female singer ever.
There's a lot of stars
Whitney
that were
Houston.
really sad to see go down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. She had an incredible voice, and it was a shame.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, I've always heard the one thing about becoming a musician, and it probably fits with anybody in power, that you lose touch in the reality of no. That, like MC Hammer, you either hire a bunch of glad-heading yes men, or you want to help the people who you grew up with, and nobody's going to say no to getting the guy who's giving them money, unless you have a friend like James who might say no just to fuck with you.
So, do any of you guys ever watch, there's a show on, I want to say it's ID, it's called Autopsy.
Oh, I
And
haven't watched it.
there's a doctor, a pathologist, his name is Hunter, Dr. Michael Hunter, I believe. And he goes back and he looks at all the deaths of all these stars. And he goes, what's leading up to the death of whatever star it may be. And it's very fascinating to watch him actually. Forensic anthropology is basically probably what it more is. And he goes, he gets news articles, he watches video, he talks, he sees the reports from the doctors, he does all the stuff, and he goes through what probably led up to the death of whomever it may be. Highly suggest that you guys watch that show. It's very good because it's very interesting to see.
So that's what Autopsy is about, huh?
Yeah.
I've seen like bits and pieces of it, and I've been like, I kind of want to watch that.
Yeah, it's very. He just did the one I just watched most recent. He did the one on Davy Jones from the Monkees, and because he passed away at 65. And what was interesting about Davy Jones is he had a pretty clean image, and was in fairly good shape. He was a little guy. He was only 5'4", and he had a very good reputation. He was nice to everybody and things like that. And anyway. Long story short, I mean, he had some heart issues and they were undiagnosed, and his doctors didn't treat him right. But it was very interesting to go through the whole thing, to watch him go through the steps and what probably led up to it, and why did he die, and what lifestyles may have contributed to it. And anyway, it's an interesting show. I'm not plugging it. I get no money from them, but I find it interesting to watch.
Yeah, you bring that up. Now, the Monkees is not a band that many people mention anymore.
So did you know at one time
TV show they were really
this
big.
is going to blow your mind.
Almost as big as California
Okay,
Raisins.
you want your minds blown?
Sure.
The Monkees sold more albums than the Beatles and the Rolling Stones together.
I knew that, actually.
That's because you're related to the old guy.
No, partially.
Literally, guys, as crazy it sounds, they outsold both of them together, and it was. They were the first original kind of boy band made up. They were just a group of guys put together.
I used to like them when I was a kid.
Yeah, I mean,
the male version of the Spice Girls.
I guess you could say.
In a way.
I mean, they were a bunch of people who auditioned for roles. And
absolutely.
I love
the only one. Peter Turk was the only real true musician in the whole group. And and they so they couldn't tour at first because these guys actually couldn't play instruments, so they had to teach them how to play instruments.
That's funny.
They did kind of learn to sing. They put them together in the studio to sing, but there was a cover band. They never played the instruments. They did get them singing, so it's very interesting.
Who was the one musician in the Partridge Family? I can never remember his name. Because he was.
We all want Braden.
Because he was the same way. Because when Danny bought because if you all don't know what the Partridge Family were, basically it was a TV show about a family who was a band. There's more to it, but that's the basics of it. And when the guy went up, Danny Partridge, I forgot his real name. David Bonaducci was on stage playing the bass.
Danny.
He had to go to actually turn to him and say, "Dude, you don't strum a bass guitar." It's like, well, what? You don't strum a bass guitar.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, so I was.
Yeah. So that's how a lot of that, the boy band time, I think, started way back with the Monkees. Yeah, and putting these guys together who really weren't musicians. They kind of learned to sing, and they put them together, and next thing you know, they're the highest grossing band of all time.
But then they just get swept under the rug.
Well,
Because, I mean, they really are a very forgotten band. I mean, more people know about the Animals because House of the Rising Sun than the Monkees.
But the real question is...
You know, they've been very successful. Sorry, Jonathan. They've been very successful were very successful in a number of their comeback tours, surprisingly enough. Because people my age, I was not particularly a Monkey fan, but I knew their music and all that. But there were a lot of people that would go to their concerts, you know, and try to relive their youth.
Weren't they a TV show that was a band versus a band that had a TV show? Like, for example, the Spice Girls, they were musicians and vocalists, and then they got movies and other appearances.
Right.
Weren't they made for a TV show?
They were put together, I believe you're correct. They were put together for the TV show The Monkees.
So I guess the question is, could you consider them a legitimate band? Versus like the Spice Girls.
The end after they learned.
Yeah, I think so.
So they were inspired to at least be able to play their music at some point.
They did learn, you know. But being a snob back then, I mean, I really never considered Monkees a true band. I mean, if I was going to listen to somebody, it's
not going to be the Monkees.
It'd be Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show.
Well, it wasn't Dr. Hook either, but definitely
King Crimson.
Jimmy, well, yeah, I mean, literally a lot of King Crimson, and you're talking about a lot of really good musicians.
They're odd.
But because, I was looking at bands like Jethro Tull, and I was into Pink Floyd, and I was into,
So Sid Barrett or the Roger Waters?
Well, I don't want to go into that one. That's
too esoteric. The original lead singer who went crazy on Pink Floyd?
Yeah. And there's an example of drugs gone awry.
So I want to completely switch topics. This was something I actually, as far as I know, this just came out on July 23rd. It's the first time I ever heard about it. Did you hear how Niel Armstrong died?
Yes, I did. As a matter of fact, the family sued on this situation.
It was a $6 million settlement. As far as I know, it wasn't supposed to come out. So basically what happened, Neil Armstrong, one of the most famous astronauts.
The most famous astronaut.
At least
first man to walk on the moon. Apollo 11, the biggest
I would say, at least for American audiences, he is the most famous.
Everybody in the world watched it.
So he died at 82 years old because of incompetent post-surgical care at Mercy Health in Fairfield Hospital.
Yep.
So this is amazing.
Can you believe that? I mean...
So, and it was a simple procedure, and this sounds weird, but what happened is he underwent a bypass surgery, which nowadays bypass surgery, as scary as it is done on a fairly routine basis. I mean, it's still very dangerous, but
absolutely, it's still a medical procedure, and
but it's common.
Procedures are dangerous no matter what.
Which I will be in on Tuesday.
Oh, great!
Back.
But it just blew my mind, the fact that this hospital killed Neil Armstrong. Now, I was thinking about that. I mean, of all the people to kill,
did they say exactly what?
I never heard.
So
because there's a lot of things you have to take into factors of how he dies.
So here it is. Mr. Armstrong had undergone bypass surgery in early August of 2012. And his wife told the Associated Press afterwards that he had amazing resilience and was walking around the corridor. But when the nurse removed the wires for a temporary pacemaker, he began to bleed into the membrane surrounding the heart, leading to a cascade of problems that resulted in his death on August 25th. In a scorching July 2014 email to the hospital's lawyers, Wendy R. Armstrong, a lawyer and the wife of Mr. Armstrong, Mark noted that Mark and his brother Rick would soon be traveling to Florida to speak to a ceremony. So basically, it sounds like either somebody screwed up.
That nurse is in a lot.
Well, no, the question was, and reading that, was that a problem with the temporary pacemaker? Was that an issue with the nurse? Or was it a freak accident? I mean, I don't know enough about it.
I believe it was a medical cascade of problems that occurred. I think
because of the removal.
Yeah, it was hard to. They couldn't figure out in time what was going wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And basically the heart sac area was filling full of fluid, constricting on the heart and keeping it from beating. And then the pacemaker wasn't working right, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. And
what it sounds like to me, and I've gone through quite a few different procedures.
They tried finding his heart.
They just were not. Sounds like there was just not enough checks and balances on it, because the nurse should have had, depending on what type of nurse she is, either shouldn't have been doing it, should have been doing it with oversight, or the procedure didn't go as well as it could have. So when she did her job properly, it was either the surgeon didn't do his job properly, or there's just too many. So in this day and age, it sounds like it fell apart.
Let me ask something. It was a $6 million judgment. In this day and age,
that's crazy.
How many judgments are that low?
I know. That's kind of what I'm
That's
thinking.
my point. So I'm wondering if this isn't one of these things where, look, it's cheaper to settle. Let's give them $6 million. Okay, everybody's happy. To really get into the nuts and bolts of what's happening. Maybe he'll end up on autopsy sometime, and I'll be able to watch it on TV, and we'll figure out what.
It's fun you say that, but it's totally not uncommon. For example, it's a wrestling analogy, but Ted Turner, the Turner company, was known for, if you even remotely talk to a lawyer and sue them, they would instantly hand you money. Anybody who worked for Turner used to apparently joke about, I need a payday, let's sue the boss. And they would do it. The wrestlers apparently would do it even routinely. It really happened with the WCW World Championship Wrestling was...
You're talking about the Ted Turner? It's CNN?
TBS and all that, Okay. So what happened is Ted Turner's company bought a wrestling organization called WCW. It became WCW. It was, I've got the original owner. But at some point it became common for Turner Legal that if anybody remotely sued, they would always settle. If you got, so that they became known for doing that throughout at least the wrestling industry.
That's interesting.
So I could totally see hospitals doing that too.
Well, I mean, when I heard the amount on the judgment, that was the first thing that caught my attention.
What that says is that the findings were debatable. That would be where I would say a settlement that low being is that it was one of those things where the hospital was technically at fault, but not specifically at fault.
Right.
So that would be something where, as I said, one of their checks and balances failed. Maybe the pacemaker company.
Maybe there's a known issue with that.
That was an error, or
there could be a number of reasons. And don't forget, the other way I look at it too, we're all humans.
Yeah.
And nobody's perfect. And accidents happen, as unfortunate it is, and particularly in Mr. Armstrong's case. And, it's horrible. It's too bad, but, stuff happens.
Yeah.
No, I just found that amazing because I knew he had passed away, but I didn't realize the reason why, the case behind it. So I thought that was interesting. And the fact that depending on the age of the nurse and the doctors, how bad you feel for pretty much killing everybody's hero.
Yeah.
I'm sure nobody was. Aldrin is still a good guy.
Buzz is pretty amazing.
He's not somebody you want to piss off. I think he just recently decked somebody.
He's pretty feisty.
What was it? It was
my hero.
Well, when he's you're in the second place citizen on the moon. I mean, what are you gonna expect? He's got to fight everything.
Got to fight for everything. Yeah, I always thought about.
I was there too.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, weren't there 11 other men that walked on the moon?
Yeah.
And you
Buzz Aldrin
name
Neil Armstrong are the ones
only two that you
know.
Yeah, even I back then watching those things, I couldn't tell you.
I'll say.
I'm sorry, guys.
Russians, didn't they walk on the moon too?
Who?
Russians?
No. Russians never.
We're the only people who have actually landed physically on the moon.
Yeah.
Okay. There've been countries that landed all their devices, but as far as having a manned mission, we're the only one. And the most interesting thing
Russians were the first one to get out into space.
True.
Also, I think they were the first
to orbit. They were the first one to they did a lot of firsts.
But they didn't.
They also were the first to die in space. True.
Yeah, true.
So one of my all-time favorite Buzz Aldrin stories. Apparently, at some point in time, Buzz Aldrin punched a moon landing denier in the face as an old guy.
Yes, I do remember seeing that one.
I love that. According to this, it says 2002. I don't remember exactly, but I always thought that was hilarious. Out of all the people to say no to, or you didn't do that, you say it to, the second citizen.
Put his butt on the line. I mean, we're talking, you got to remember, guys, when we went back, there was no guarantee they were going to make it. They were going to get back. I remember Apollo 13, okay? And they had not been for the lunar lander, the LEM, they would not have made it back. And to do what they did back in the 70s
it's insane.
It's unbelievable. It's like driving a Model T around the country. Yeah, good luck. I mean, you know.
What I would say is most people don't know this, but we had submarines in the Revolutionary War.
Well, that's true.
Now, the thing about those submarines is that you weren't guaranteed to live through it.
No.
That's the same thing about going there.
Exactly.
Imagine you're being put in the water in a rickety-ass wooden
tub
submarine in the water.
Except the difference being
with a bomb strapped to it, where you're supposed to go up and put that bomb onto another ship.
But you're doing it up in space now.
Yeah, and doing it in space.
You have 16-inch thick hull with a little bit of gold leafing, hoping to protect you.
I got to tell you, what we did back then was we would never even consider doing that now. Yeah. It was unbelievable what they did.
So there's talk about this. There's an amazing YouTube video, and I wish I remembered more about it, that actually talked about the landing computer that was designed.
You mean the one that kept failing?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. The funniest thing I was reading about that, the error, the code that kept pop up.
Right.
It was basically basically it was stating everything's okay and there's an error code. But what was genius about the computer, according to the article and a couple articles I've read in the YouTube videos, the fact what this computer was designed to do, you could hard reboot it. You could reboot it and it would always keep a spot, and it had the ability somehow to figure out what was the most important thing and start kicking stuff off it that it was doing.
Huh. It was pretty impressive. It really was, considering that you're talking about slide rules and punch cards and the woman that actually did the calculations for the re-entries by longhand. Who was just an absolute genius.
Yeah.
Who also wrote if I remember correctly, I think she also wrote the error codes too.
She was just incredible. I mean, it's because of her that they were able to, here we have this craft coming back, and now you got to guess where the trajectory is going to be when they're coming in, and at what point to enter, and at one angle to enter. And okay, we got to put some ships near this because he's going to splash down here. Yeah. And it's unbelievable, the stuff that they did back then. I mean, it just.
And so I don't have, I heard the actual amount, so I don't have the specifics, but if you take that versus say a modern day calculator, has probably quadruple, if not more in the order of magnitude, computing power than that landing computer
on
had.
Lander, yeah.
I could remove the chip in my phone, and that little tiny device has more capacity than that computer. Yeah. By a lot.
By a lot.
And it's a little tiny chip of something that took up probably 9 acres of what you got here.
I can't find the specifics.
It was incredible what they did, to be honest. And nobody believed that they were going to be able to do it either. And now the talk, if you really want to add some controversy to the whole thing, the question now that's coming out is, if Kennedy had not challenged us to do this, okay, and had not been assassinated, he was actually talking about, well, maybe it isn't really practical. Maybe we really shouldn't be talking about going to the moon. And he was literally going, theoretically, from people that were in his inner circle, he was talking about walking back the idea that we need to do it within 10 years. Well. And so now the theory is, what if he hadn't have been assassinated? Had he lived, would we have actually landed on the moon?
Yeah. Well, I guarantee they would, specifically just because that's a modern day politics thing. I mean, you promise the world or say the world and things that were walked back. But the other thing was the fact that there were people at the time protesting about how much the Apollo program was costing and the Mercury program was costing.
Okay, and then you completely left Gemini alone, which was
and Gemini.
Okay, so when you get to the actual dollars that we spent, it's mind-boggling how much money that we, in today's dollars, it's like $500 billion alone for just the Apollo project.
Do you think that, or where are we at? Are we at $9 trillion in debt still? Anyways, but do you think that if we hadn't done that, would we still be in as big of a debt as the United States is?
Well, would
Now,
have
it's all
to. I don't.
Well, the hard part about that
don't
is
have the answer to that.
I would say on cost-wise is hard, but the fact that how much actually money the programs generated revenue as far as the technology invented. The computer, for example, there was never a computer that was like the landing program. Nothing like that had ever existed before the Apollo program. It just did not exist.
Well,
so there were a lot
we
of
had were the missiles that the V programs from the Germans.
Yeah, but the difference, though, is what that computer was capable of. That computer was actually invented specifically for that program. I watched another show about it.
Sure.
Talk about how when they were designing it, they didn't actually have any idea how to do it.
Right.
Nothing at the time had ever even remotely been considered.
So that brings up the question is, because of going to the moon and what it took to do that, where would we be technologically now?
Oh, we'd be
right? Would we be where we're at now if that had never happened? I mean, there's so many things that spun from that whole thing. The computing power.
So I'm handing the old guy something. So the Apollo program roughly cost from 61 to 73, 25.4 billion United States dollars. The old guy has the actual, what it would be just for inflation.
So it looks like $212 trillion.
Yep.
Okay.
And
well,
Well, I guess we did pretty good with our debt.
I guess so.
So-
I mean,
We're
So-
down to what?
boy, I
So I was-
don't
$2
know.
trillion.
hold on, I'm trying to, if this
Yeah.
stupid thing would work. I had it up, but it crashed on me.
Why John's waiting for
Technology-wise,
his technology to work.
Well, so the U.S. national debt right now, is it what, $22 trillion?
Okay.
According to this website.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So $190 trillion that we've come back from. Anyways, but so if we really think about it, yeah, I don't think we would have the technology that we have now.
It's hard to say, isn't it?
It is
Yeah.
hard to say, but I think with the advancements of the computer that was doing basically its own just its own decision making at the time, I don't think that we would have what we have.
So
now.
let me just throw this out to you, only
You
because
think even,
I lived it.
Wozniak and Steve Jobs would have even thought of doing anything.
I would say Wozniak skipped Steve Jobs.
Okay.
But would they even
Let me just
together?
throw-
Would they have?
Wait, hold on,
said
hold on.
something
That's-
about it?
So yeah, let's not forget, having lived there. So when I was in high school in the late '60s, we were.
Capto.
I learned to work on a programming language called Fortran, part of Nutran. It was done on a punch card.
Okay.
So
Yes,
we
I do know
were
about that.
working, we were writing programs, and we were getting into the basic of programming that everything's based off of now. Back then, and can I say that the space program actually added anything to that? I don't think so. I think we were getting into learning how to write programs to make, A happen. Okay, so I want this step to do this step to do this step. And so, I mean, we were learning to do this stuff, maybe with or without the flight programs. But there's no doubt that the space industry, everything that we did on that, between flight and learning how rockets work and learning everything else that's involved with it, wouldn't have happened without that.
See, this is where I was going. I think it would have happened. It may not have happened as fast. It may have been on a slower timetable because when there's a need, especially the challenge, what happened, however it happened,
Correct.
that needed the more money flows in. But I still think it would have happened, just not as fast. And
So would you say that at this point, where we have these things now, do you think that we would still be carrying around iPods?
yes.
Okay. So it only put us back, maybe 15 years?
Yeah. And one of the reasons why is because you
It's a
always,
good question. I will never know.
We'll
I
never
mean, it's
know.
good to theorize, what
15, 20 years
what's the possibilities?
behind where we are now?
I will say, the reason I say that is you had geniuses like Steve Wozniak. If you guys are a Jobs person, look at the history. Jobs didn't really do
Wasn't
all
an
that
idiot
much
compared to
beside.
Wozniak.
Well, he wasn't writing software. He wasn't writing programs. He wasn't writing
He
code.
was a marketing guy.
yeah.
But as far as the actual computer power, it was Wozniak, and it was
Woz was
people
good,
like
that's
Woz.
right.
Stuff like that would would have happened. It may not be exact, but there were always geniuses. The best other comparison.
Let's not forget Bill Gates. I mean, yeah, he was sitting out there writing BASIC. I mean, he really did.
Throwing.
Yeah.
All right.
And
so
Bill Gates behind anything, but you know, Wozniak and Jobs
and I guess
ahead of him for a while.
The best comparison I think I can come up with, if you take a look at cars, from being like rich people's toys in the 1800s, you talk about the Model T with Henry Ford. And if you want to take a look at the Duesenberg, you know, in the time when the roads had speed limits of 15 miles an hour, the Duesenberg was going 100 miles an hour. So there were always, that was a little
that was way later. Yeah.
There were always engineering geniuses who came along at the time who advanced it. So it would have happened. It may not have, because, you know, what was it? I think, well, I'm trying to remember, because I think the Duesenberg, I think, was $5,000 to $8,000, which was, at the time it came out, nobody could have afforded except the ultra rich. So it would eventually trickle down to everybody else.
Technology would eventually become cheaper. Kind of like what Henry Ford's idea was, that, you know, for the masses and make it cheaper. Sure. Absolutely.
So I guarantee it would have happened.
I think it would have too. It's just what timeline. I think that the influences that the Apollo program had, yes, there was day-to-day stuff, things like microwaves, and, you know, we wouldn't have had microwaves as quickly. And there's a lot of things that they developed that they used in all those space programs. I think particularly for the aerospace industry. I think that's really where the advances really came.
Well, because the original microwaves were called radar ranges, and that was something they noticed back in World War II, when the guys in the ships would notice. So I think it's stuff that would have happened. The other thing is, as much as it sounds horrible, is the 20th century having so many wars. Wars drive major innovation. You can take a look at Vietnam, and you can take a look at the stuff of the 80s and the Cold War. That really boosted the computing power, because when you have, for some reason, you have such a war-dominated era, money is put into that for revelation.
Well, when you have a major need, in other words, we need to develop this, and then you've got the willpower and the money behind it to do it, then it becomes that case. And in this case, you know, it's like, you know, developing the atomic bomb. All right,
or the stealth bomber, even.
Or the stealth bomber now, So
I mean, they're still talking about putting stealth bomber technologies on just day-to-day fighters that they have, which they haven't done because we've cut back on our military funding.
Well, that's what the F-22 Raptor was for, and that's
F-35
and the F-35. The problem, the F-22 had it too because it was designed, but the F-35, the issue with that is that apparently it's a flying junker because it keeps having grounding issues.
Well,
but it's also fairly revolution.
It was a fighter designed to try to do too many things for too many Navy, Marines, whatever. You know,
warehouses were okay.
Yeah,
but you know.
Well, they're trying to replace stuff like one of my favorite airplanes of all time is it's the Warthog. It's the not F-22. It's an A-10 tank killer.
Yeah,
that's, you know, because basically they designed an airplane around a really massive gun.
Yeah. That's exactly what they did.
Which is exactly what they did with tanks. That's how they came up with tanks first.
Yeah.
We got a really big gun. We want to go over there and shoot that guy.
And we want that gun to go from point A to point B. So we got to put something under, which was a horse and buggy, and drag it over there, you know, which is kind of funny because if you look at history, do you realize how much horsepower we actually used in World War II? And I'm talking about four-legged horses pulling. When you go and study history of World War II, it will blow your mind, folks, if you realize how much we depended on horses.
World War I, World War II.
World War II? I mean, World War I, yes.
But World War I way more.
World War I, but look at the time, that made sense. But think about World War II when we had jeeps and cars and tanks and stuff.
What was that movie they did with the War Horse? Terrible movie.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of brings you back to what was going on versus World War I to World War II.
Yeah,
and it was only 20 years difference.
Yeah, they're pretty close. Yeah,
it was like 20 years difference between those two wars, and just the advancements that we had done. And oh my God, the amount of gas that we used in World War I.
Well, you want to think something even crazier?
We talked about that in one of our shows, but it was disgusting.
The U.S.-Cuban War, 1898-ish.
Spanish American?
Yeah, it says, when we invaded Cuba, they were still using, some of the powders weren't smokeless.
Right.
So if you think about that, I mean, that's pretty amazing.
It was a failure too. So yeah, using black powder still.
Yeah. I mean, so it's pretty amazing how fast, evolution happens. Actually, the one that blew my mind is if it wasn't for Hiram Maxim's friends, nobody in World War I would have had the machine gun except the United States. Because what happened is his friends, if I remember the story right, the friends basically said, nobody needs this. Why don't you go over to Europe? And then gave it to the British, and then Germans got it. If you don't know what the Maxim gun, it was a water-cooled machine gun. If I remember correctly, it was the first actual one that was not ridiculous. Because a Gatling gun was hand-cranked. This one was basically a trigger, and it was surrounded by a water jacket and shenanigans. But
that's the one that you still had to have the spare rods, right?
Well, what they were doing is the barrels were melting, and if they didn't keep the water cooled enough, the water would evaporate, the barrels would melt, and the guns would blow up. So Browning is actually the one that came along and redesigned it to be
with the interchangeable barrels.
To be to be.
I was trying to remember.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember. Was that one that they did that with?
Right. But that always blew my mind when you actually look a little bit of the history of it. Was if it wasn't for a couple of people telling him to go overseas.
Well, he was looking for money. He was just trying to fund his invention, and he had to go where the money was.
Well, that just always
the guys lighting their cigarettes on one of those.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Well, because I remember hearing a story that the British used to cook tea in it, or having some sort of tea attachment.
Well, I believe the Brits would do anything for tea.
That's true. And you know what? Actually, I gotta give it to some of those Brits. Some of those teas are damn good.
It can be.
They can be really good.
I'm a coffee fanatic,
I'm a coffee fanatic too. But
I'll drink some of the teas. Are really good. Yeah,
damn good. But anyways.
Yeah.
So usually when I hear Americans joking about Brits and their teas, I'll play along, but I'll secretly be like, "There's some of those I
there
will
are
drink."
some really good. Yeah, there really are.
We have the old guy here. This is always my favorite question. I'm going to start with James about what's your favorite firearm.
Oh my God, are we really going to get into this?
Yes.
Yeah, I do gotta say I am still partial to my Henry. For a rifle, for a handgun, I'll always go to the 1911.
You just have to polish it a lot.
I actually really don't, I've got some oilcloths that I just keep on it, and it keeps the brass nice. But
so you have a yellow boy.
Yeah,
I like
Golden boy.
I like case hardening look. I like the case hardening look personally.
Aren't we getting a little too geeky here? We're gonna lose this audience so quickly when we start talking.
Really,
about it.
we talk about the computer that landed the moon, and that's.
So for me, I mean, if it depends how far back you want to go. For me, okay, if we want to get really far back, single action army, okay, the first true revolver Colt, the Peacemaker that everybody talked about.
The gun that won the West, the greatest marketing campaign in history.
Well, technically, the Peacemaker didn't really win the West.
No, it didn't really. But the West was never really won or lost.
That's what you're doing. We're going geeky now.
But and we can go back even further if you want to start getting into the flintlocks, into the brown bests. I mean, you can't ask me any one gun. If I had just one gun.
Okay,
you said old guy, you said Rob.
So Rob, if you wanted to go out shooting tomorrow
with just one rifle and one pistol.
Let's just say we'll give him two. With a rifle and a pistol.
You mean just to shoot?
Just to shoot.
I mean, I don't have to worry about my ass being on the line or anything, right? Just to go out and shoot.
Yeah, just to go plinking.
Just two guns, one for distance, one for closer.
Any caliber, any brand.
Three because
three.
For me, the reason why I say that shotgun.
Okay.
All right. So yes, if I was to go out and for a handgun, it'd be a 1911 hands down, no doubt about it. Probably the best gun ever invented. Period. My opinion.
Go with that opinion as well. I know John does.
Yeah. So, and then I would take a shotgun, and in all honesty, there's so many great shotguns out there. I mean, starting back in the early teens with the Browning, coming out with some of the pump shotguns and some of the things they were doing. But if I was to take a gun right now, being the snob that I am, I take my Kohler, and yes, Kolar. You guys can look it up. It's an actual trap shooting gun, so I would take that. Most people go,
it's like it's just like a cooler, ladies.
I know about it before.
Yeah, see, so there's that. And then my God, long guns. That's so hard. I mean, if I want to just go out and long distance tack driving, shooting, I have a Ruger custom barrel 22 250 that I have that is just an absolute tack driver, bolt action rifle.
Your Winchester 22. That one's a Niel driver too.
Yeah.
So for me, I'd have to go with 1911. With the old guy because it's
your Rock Island.
Honestly, any 1911. I'm a big fan of the Model 70.
I still would like to get a Rock Island one. Honestly,
I'm a big fan of the Model 70 version of the 1911. But any of that handgun and.
You mean the Series 70?
Yeah.
Okay.
Series 70. And
let's get it right.
I'm close enough.
You're going to go right away. You're going to have gun guys going, that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Series 70.
And I got an Anschutz 22 that I was given as a child.
Correct.
It is my favorite gun to shoot because is a guy who's 6'5" and 250-ish pounds. I look ridiculous, but it's still an absolute blast to shoot. It is one of my all-time favorite guns.
Well, Anschutz known as one of the most.
Too many problems with that peep sight.
It's a pain in the ass, but it is
They're
so many.
Drivers. What do you think they used in the Olympics? I mean, Anschutz makes some of the best 22 rifles ever.
I have so many good memories with that firearm. I mean, that was one of those things that if I had to run from my house that's escaping minus my family and the pets, that'd be one of the things I'd grab because it means that much to me.
I just still like I said, his Winchester one where I'm sitting there, John's reloading, and I'm still.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's why I have the 45. If I have to switch to another gun, I'm in the. Where did I put myself in?
So if you really want to start the controversy, and if we're talking about firearms here, start the controversy asking gun guys, what is if you had to run out and the world's coming to an end and the zombie apocalypse is happening, what is the one gun? If you had only choice of one gun.
Of ones I own or just any gun?
Any gun. What is the one gun that you would take? And why?
Zombie apocalypse?
And why?
Do I have unlimited?
It doesn't have to be killing zombies, but the point.
Okay.
I have a point about this.
Shotgun,
well, okay.
How much ammo is the question?
Well, all right. So you bring up a good point, and part of the reasons why we had AR-15s and things like that. So, and then you could talk about reloading, but the fact is, guys. 22 long rifle ammunition is probably the most prevalent ammunition there is in the world.
Yeah.
There's probably more rounds per capita, shall we say, of 22 long rifle ammunition anywhere, which in reality you could take just about. If you're a good enough shot, there isn't any game you can't take with it. Might be a little tough with the bigger stuff, but you could do it.
Trying to take a bear with it, and you could do it.
But you could. It's been done.
You'd be there for a while or a hell of a shot.
Lewis and Clark expedition. They did it with a 20 caliber air rifle that killed the bear. Jesus. All right. So, yeah. I mean, if you were to think about it, when you really think about it, and you put it down. 22 long rifle would be if you only had one choice, because you could just go anywhere.
Those 22 air rifles.
Yeah, well,
I actually agree because that was one of the reasons in Vietnam they wanted to switch to like the AR-15 because lighter, you could carry more rounds because they were smaller than 308s or 30. Right. Was it 308s?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they won Grand, it was 30-06s.
Yeah, 30. That's it. 30-06.
14s were at 308. So yeah, you're right. The whole idea is that they could carry more ammunition. It's still I think the debate is still out about the 223 or 5.56 NATO, but
what was it? There's the Kalashnikov, the guy who actually invented the AR, the AK-47. I remember was bitching about Americans because the AK-74. It's like you guys are the reason that gun came out because it was basically lighter ammunition compared to the 7.62 by 39 the AK shoots, the 47.
Yeah, true. But I'll tell you what, you want to talk about a gun that just virtually doesn't fail is the AK.
So I've heard stories from people I know personally and stories I've seen online where like these guys will be, these soldiers will be in Afghanistan, Iraq, they'll be shot at, they kill the guys and they get over them and it's held together by a wish and a whim and it's killing people.
Yes.
I've seen it, yeah. I've seen some of the ones that they've taken pictures of where it's literally like duct tape and chicken wire.
There's a story of a guy on one of my old favorite shows, some History Channel show, was talking about being in Vietnam, taking an AK off of somebody, throwing a locker, and like 6 months, 7 months later getting back, and it's completely rusted. He said him and his friends took their boots, broke open the action. It was fireable.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, you couldn't do that with an AR-15.
No. And I always thought the
Especially of that
actual
era.
design of how the AK is put together is just genius.
It is.
It's
really is.
It's one of the benefits though is the piston versus the direct gas, which clogs up.
So, you want to hear another reason why so many guns failed in Vietnam in the early days?
The powder.
So everybody remember good old WD-40?
Yep.
So for some reason, you know what WD stands for? Water
Off the top of my head.
Okay,
but I've
water
heard it a few times.
It's a
water
cleaner.
displacement. No, it's a penetrator. So what it was designed for?
That's what she said.
To displace water. WD, water displacement, Formula 40. Okay. For some reason, somebody got it in their heads that it was a lubricant in the military, and they bought tanker trucks full of these stuff, and the guys were out in the swamps in the humidity trying to spray the stuff all over their ARs to make them work. And,
I never heard that.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, it was doing the opposite. It was not a lubricant; it was a attractant. It was making dust and dirt and things cling to all the stuff that they thought they were helping themselves with. So a lot of the malfunctions and problems were, and I know if you got some old time arborers out there, they're going to yell at me and say, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about, but I can tell you from a little bit of knowledge that was part of the problem.
Wasn't it also because they switched powder types from Eugene Stoner's original specification?
There's some debate. Is powder, yes, some powders are definitely more
Stickier. Dirtier.
dirty, shall we say, I guess is the term, okay, than others, and that didn't help anything. So there was a cost savings factor.
WD-40 and the powder is causing problems.
Combinations, yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of stories, never from anybody I actually know.
And
But
please, those of you that own WD-40 now, whoever it may be, I have nothing against you. It worked great for breaking rusted nuts loose, and it's perfect for that. So thank you. I don't want to be sued.
I've heard a lot of stories, not from anybody I know personally, about being in Vietnam, and you're in the middle of the swamp being shot at, and you have guys completely taking the uppers and lowers, removing the detents and trying to get it to work. And so I can imagine how crazy that would be, especially years later. You find out that it was because of WD-40 and a crap powder.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories, and fortunately for me, I was not sent to Vietnam, but all I can do is tell you my stories from people.
So Netflix put out a fantastic documentary by Ken Burns of Vietnam. Have you watched that one?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Man, that one. Growing up in the time of having uncles about my age now,
right,
younger, who came back from Vietnam, you knew them, but you never talked to them about it. You knew they were there, didn't say a damn word about it because they didn't want to talk about it.
Well, because they weren't receptive well. I mean, we treated our vets so horrible. We're still, out there, we're still treating our vets horribly.
Yeah. Well, sorry.
Go ahead.
James's brother has an actual story about that, about getting back from somewhere and having a bunch of Vietnam vets there lining the jetway and surrounding areas and blocking people off and giving them handshakes. And
absolutely.
The vets came up and stepped in for Afghanistan and some of
the Vietnam vets are the strongest group out there with a voice saying, hey, we were treated like crap, and we're not going to let any of our other vets being treated like crap. Yeah. And I'm part of an organization called the Patriot Guards. And what we do is, as a motorcycle group, is we will go to funerals and fly our colors for any vet that wants it, any family that wants it, and it's quite an organization. You guys can look it up.
Yeah, my brother was doing that with his Marine guys too.
Yeah, a lot of the groups go out and do that.
So there's a song about it by Charlie Daniels. It's one of my favorite songs. Still in Saigon. That kind of talks about some of the issues. I mean, it's the best way I could say really quickly to get an idea, if you're a younger person, of kind of what it was about. It's a great song. So give it a listen. So, ladies and gentlemen, it seems like it's time that I got to go tuck the old guy into bed.
Did I just miss something?
You missed.
I missed the song. Did I fall asleep? Charlie Daniels.
I don't.
Where's the fiddle?
I don't want to play it because the last time I even mentioned a movie,
A movie?
Fucking Warner Brothers, I'm talking about you removed a review. Yes, Warner Brothers, I'm still gonna hold this irritation towards you for removing a movie nobody wanted to see in the first place, especially me. So, ladies and gentlemen, for the California Pariah, the Fat Man, and the Old Guy, as always, thank you for listening.
Goodbye. Bye.